All right, good afternoon. Welcome to day 2 of Module 5, Lesson 3. We are going to wrap up. We're going to do number 5 and 6 today, looking at the environmental impacts and then working on the Keystone Pipeline. All right, so please get your notebooks open. We're going to pick up where we left off. Once we're done with those two, then I have your review sheet for the Module 5, Lesson 3 quiz. And that is going to be our last 2 assignments for the quarter. Yay! Silent round of applause. We're so excited. So let's finish strong. All right, so here we go. So give me a thumbs up. You got your notebook open. So give me another thumbs up. Let me know you're ready. You got your notebook open. Thank you, Alicia, Elena. Thank you, Tamia. Get your notebook open. Thank you, Amy. Brooke. Thank you, Saeja. All right, let's get started then, okay? So where we left off, let's take a look at our notebook, okay? So we'll just review a little bit. So our key supporting question was, or is, should the government regulate the environment? So that's the whole goal that we're looking at. And we're kind of looking at the history and then how the government's gotten involved. We did our 5 key vocab words: calamities, which is disaster; omnipresent, ever-present; repercussion, consequence; sustainable, which would be like renewable; and then summit would be a conference, okay? We talked about how Silent Spring, so it's a book by Rachel Carson, kicked off the environmental movement in the 1960s, bringing awareness of harmful pesticides and the impact not only on people, on soil, food, but also on water, and really kickstart a social movement of more support. Over time, especially in the late 60s going into the 70s, we see the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency, and then we see many different acts passed, legislation or laws passed, to help work on not only protecting the environment, undoing some of the damage done, and going forward, making sure that we are doing things in a way that hopefully is we're not damaging or ruining our resources, we're doing it in a responsible way, okay? So where we're going to pick up today is the long-term effects. So in what ways has the federal government responded to environmental threats since the 1960s, and do you think it's enough? Why or why not? Before we answer that, all right, we're going to jump over into Canvas. And I'm going to go to the Reading Environmental Policy page. So we're on 5.3, Environmental Policy page. Long-term effects. Okay, so before we do that, we're going to watch a Nearpod. And this is where your participation, so earning that 8 and 9, not having to do it, and stuff is going to be really helpful. So I'm not going to make you log in. All right, we'll watch it, and then I want you to respond in the chat when they pause, okay? So it's looking at the 5 major human impacts on the environment. Okay, 5 major human impacts on the environment. So make sure you're paying attention, because every time it pauses, then I'm going to look for a little bit of response, and then we'll keep going. Okay, the video is about 10 minutes. All right, here we go.
At this point, people have been studying the impacts that humans have had on the world around us for a solid 50 years. And while it's hard to get a handle on exactly how the choices we make every day affect the environment, there's no question that our lifestyles, our cars, our need for more farmland, and our love of all kinds of plastic stuff are putting the hurt on ecosystems all over the world.
Okay, so really quick, what do you already know about human impact on the environment? So it's a little bit of review from yesterday. Name something maybe specifically that you know has been an impact on the environment. Be specific, don't just put pollution, all right? So be specific. Trash in the ocean, absolutely right. It, not only excess trash, but irresponsible disposal of trash, right? I mean, we have trash, and there, you know, at some point we're gonna have some trash, right? It'd be nice to reduce it. It's a smoking. Yeah, smoking. That's definitely been reduced, which is good, but yeah, it definitely doesn't help air quality, especially if you're in confined space. Air pollution, yeah, planes, cars. That definitely, you know, does damage. Okay, good. Let's hear maybe 1 or 2 more, and we'll move on. Quicker you respond, the quicker we go. Yeah, smog from factories, okay, production, especially in third world nations, and especially when we look at like fossil fuels and things like that, plants, we definitely see a lot of issues. In cities that are near that, the air quality is really bad. All right, very good. Thank you. Keep going.
Human activity all by itself, just people doing what they do, could be responsible for the extinction of nearly 1,000 plant and animal species to date, most of them over the last century. And even if you don't particularly care about the Barbary lion or the St. Helena olive or the passenger pigeon or anything else we've driven into extinction, the thing is, We need these other organisms. The ecosystems of the world are working very hard for us every day, filtering water, sucking carbon dioxide out of the air, producing all the food we eat, all very important ecosystem services. Benefits that the natural world provides us for free. So
Okay, Lance, we're working on number 6, or we're working on the notebook, so make sure that's open, and then we're going through the Nearpod. And the deal is, if everybody participates, then you guys don't have to do 8 and 9. Okay, so welcome. Which very important service or benefit do the ecosystems provide us for free? All right, he just named a bunch. So what's something that the ecosystem provides us for free? Water, yes. Okay, from rivers and lakes. Taking carbon monoxide out, creating oxygen, yes. So plants and plants are such a huge part of that. Okay, resources, like, can you name one? Usually about 3 times. Yes, food. Yes. So think about it. All the grains, the fruits, the vegetables, the protein, the vegetation to feed animals so that we can have meat. So there's so much that it provides for us. Very good. All right, let's keep going. Yes, the sun. We need that, right? That vitamin D. It totally helps us, and it helps plants grow. Without the sun, plants wouldn't function correctly. Animals, we would perish. It's a very, very fragile system.
So having ecosystems and keeping them intact is important, not only for the organisms who live in them, but also for us, the animals who rely on them for thousands and thousands of things that we could never do for ourselves. Over the next 2 episodes, we're going to look at these systems and how our actions are affecting the ecosystems that we need for our survival. Basically, we're messing up the environment 6 ways from Sunday, but to make it easy on ourselves, let's start with the top 5. We often hear about all the different ways that our behavior is affecting the biosphere: extinctions, climate change, deforestation, acid rain, desertification, pollution, and more. But you're asking, oh, well, why are all those things bad? What's going on? How is this stuff turning the earth into sausage? I don't understand. Well, I do understand, which is why I'm qualified to make this video, so let me lay it on you. The services that ecosystems provide for us, all the dirty work they do, can be broken up into 4 different categories. There are things that we could never, ever duplicate or work around, no matter what kind of smarty pants technology we come up with. First, healthy ecosystems provide support services that create and replenish the foundation of the Earth's biological systems. These services include recycling all of the compounds that are necessary for life through the carbon, water, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycles. They also include other processes we've talked about before, like forming new soils and producing atmospheric oxygen. Some ecosystems contribute more to these services than others, but none of them can get these basic jobs done unless they are intact. 2, ecosystems also perform provisioning services, giving us the raw materials we need to live, like the ocean provides food in the form of fish sticks and stuff. And rivers and aquifers and other freshwater sources give us water. Plants and animals also yield all kinds of fiber that we use for clothing and shelter, and all around us we find sources of fuel, whether it's biomass in the form of grasses or wood, hydropower in the form of flowing water, or the carbon locked in millions of years old trees that we're now re-releasing into the atmosphere.
Okay, let's answer this question. Which of the following statements are incorrect? Okay, so which of the following statements are incorrect? So that means that several are correct, one is incorrect, okay? Healthy ecosystems provide support services such as recycling nutrients that create and replenish foundations of the Earth's biology. Ecosystems can form new soils, produce atmospheric oxygen only with the help of humans. Ecosystems also perform provisioning services, giving us the raw materials, food, water, clothing, shelter that we need to live. Ecosystems provide us with fuel in the form of biomass, fossil fuels, which they create with the help of humans. So, which one is incorrect, do you think? Which one is incorrect? All right, so we're thinking B. All right, let me see if it's gonna let me do it.
But I'm getting ahead.
Okay, it is B. You are correct. It is B. Good job. All right, let's keep going.
Getting ahead of myself. Ecosystems also perform super important regulating services, moderating many of the Earth's systems that can get dangerous if they get out of whack. Like as we learned in biology, fungi and other organisms take on the task of decomposing dead things and poop. Meanwhile, plants help filter the water you drink and the air you breathe and provide flood control, and they also absorb all that carbon you exhale and that your car belches out, which in turn helps regulate the climate. And finally, number 4, ecosystems are just kind of awesome. It's nice to be surrounded by happy plants and critters doing their business. Nice, robust ecosystems give us places to play, scenes to inspire us, and things to just discover and learn about. They're less tangible but still important cultural services. An interesting thing about ecosystem services is that economists actually can and do calculate the monetary value they provide for humanity. If, for example, we had to do all of the things that ecosystems do for us, it would cost us $46 trillion per year, which is a lot considering that the output of the global economy is $66 trillion per year.
So most of our yearly budget. So true or false? If we had to do all the right things that ecosystems do for us, it would cost us $46 trillion a year. True or false? T or F? Yeah, true, right? So, I mean, it would cost us most of the money that we produce and stuff. So that's okay. That's all right. All right. So yeah, it would cost us most of the money. All right. Very good. Let's keep going.
So yeah, we should be happy that we don't have to pay for all that. But you'll notice that I keep saying that ecosystems can only serve up all this awesome sauce if they are intact. By that, I mean they specifically have to have their biodiversity intact, because ecosystems are just a bunch of living and non-living things working together, so unless their living parts are healthy, they're basically just rocks and weather. The main reason biodiversity is so important is that it makes ecosystems more resilient to that never-ending change we talked about a few weeks ago. Ecosystems with high biodiversity are way more resilient to disturbances than those with low biodiversity. In a high biodiversity system, if you take one species out of the mix, it's less likely that the ecosystem will collapse. Take a hectare of Amazonian rainforest. In that little patch of land, there are more different species of plants and animal than there are in all of Europe. So if a species of insect goes extinct, there's less risk that the whole house of cards will fall than, say, in the Sonoran Desert, where there are very few organisms, so the disappearance of one species could affect the entire ecosystem. So the best way to understand our impacts on the environment is through how we affect biodiversity. Unfortunately, it turns out that we've been doing a really bang-up job of endangering some of the highest biodiversity ecosystems on the planet. In some cases, we're having impacts on the organisms themselves directly. In other cases, we're affecting biodiversity indirectly by creating one or two changes in that ecosystem that cascade into all kinds of problems for living things. First, let's look at that hectare of Amazonian rainforest again, because even though it's one of those super resilient ecosystems, we're having serious impacts on it. How? Well, first, by removing a lot of what makes a forest, trees. According to some estimates, we are clear-cutting around 8,000 hectares of trees a day to provide land to graze cattle on, and to harvest wood to make coffee tables or whatever. When you cut down a hectare of rainforest, suddenly a place where a few thousand species used to live turns into a place where just a handful of species live. Some grass, some weeds, maybe some rats or mice, some insects, and, some cows. Because man, we love cows. And when you take out so many of the living things on that hectare of land, a bunch of things happen. For starters, you're not just affecting that ecosystem, but neighboring ecosystems as well. For instance, all those trees that were cut down provided the service of regulating the flow of all that rain that rainforests get, not only by absorbing some of it, but also by slowing down runoff, letting the water seep into the soil before slowly making its way into streams and rivers and ultimately the ocean. But when those trees are gone, the water hits the land and shoots off into the nearest stream, causing erosion and washing minerals and chemicals all the way to the sea, where it affects marine ecosystems. And when I say affect, I don't mean in a good way. This, my friends, is what's called a cascade effect, in this case caused by deforestation, one of the most obvious observable human impacts.
So how does deforestation impact fertility of soils and marine ecosystems? What do we think? Let's put it in the chat. Deforestation is a big one, and it is a cascading effect. Come on, this should be pretty basic. Yes. So when you have less trees, the soil has less security, and you can do that. It affects it negatively. Yes. So the question's kind of in what way, right? In what way? It disrupts the animals too. That's a good one. Yeah. So it causes erosion of the rivers because there isn't the stability for the soil. It washes minerals into the water and stuff, which can affect the ecosystem of those living and maybe throw off the balance or the pH of the water. It bothers the animals, their natural habitat. They no longer have somewhere, and stuff like that. Yeah, plants. So maybe plants that thrived in shade, now that the trees are gone, the soil isn't as good. There's too much sunlight. So it can also really impact, plants and things like that. So there's a lot of it's a cascading effect. Very good.
In addition to causing more flooding and changes in water quality, deforestation on a large scale can lead to another impact: desertification, or the spread of dry, unproductive landscapes. But cutting down trees doesn't automatically turn a forest into a desert. Desertification is driven along by additional factors, like overgrazing by cattle and over-irrigation. So how can overwatering something make it turn into a desert? Well, when we use groundwater to irrigate crops, the natural salts in the groundwater build up in the soil, eventually making it so salty that nothing wants to live there. Over time, fertile land near desert ecosystems become overtaxed, and the desert spreads. And this is exactly what has happened in China over the past century, where overgrazing and the city's unquenchable thirst for water have caused the Gobi Desert to grow by 3,600 square kilometers every year. Now,
Okay. In China, what has caused the Gobi Desert to grow by 3,600 square miles every year? He just said it. What causes deserts to grow? One of the causes, not the only. Overwatering. Good. So overwatering of agriculture, overgrazing, things like that compromises the soil, which builds up the salt content, which then creates a desert environment. Okay, good.
Now, these two impacts by themselves clearly limit the biodiversity of otherwise lush ecosystems, but because they also result in fewer trees that provide the all-important services of releasing oxygen and absorbing CO2, you know what domino's gonna fall next. The climate. Carbon dioxide, the principal greenhouse gas. It insulates the Earth, so it stands to reason that the more CO2 there is in the atmosphere, the warmer the Earth will be. And the thing is, we're reducing the size of forests at the same time as we're unleashing all kinds of greenhouse gases by burning fossil fuels. This double whammy is much of what's driving global warming. As a result, we're seeing decreases in the levels of polar sea ice, which means less habitat for polar bears, seals, and seabirds. More temperate animals are moving closer to the poles, and hotter, drier conditions are causing more grass fires and forest fires.
Okay, state 2 results of global warming. 2 results of global warming. Let's just get a couple. We're almost done. Those of you participating, thank you. Yes, the polar ice caps, that's a really big one, right? And that's reducing as the glaciers shrink, then like polar bears, seals, penguins. I was like, what's the other one I'm thinking of? Penguins, right? Their environment is shrinking and stuff. And that it just ricochets down. There are a lot of animals that need to live at a certain temperature. And when that becomes higher or hotter or colder, it can really throw us off. Yes, water levels rising, very good, with less glaciers, right? It is causing sea levels to go up. And we're seeing that yearly. All right, very good.
And while the climate has changed many times in the past, those changes usually took place over centuries or even millennia, giving organisms time to adapt or move. These changes are taking place within our lifetimes, and it's kind of a huge deal, and it's complicated. It'd take me at least like 10 minutes and 52 seconds to explain it all in detail, which is why I did that in another video. By now, hopefully you can see how one human impact can lead to another, and how, even indirectly, they can end up reducing biodiversity. But it's hard to overlook the more immediate impacts we can have on ecosystems. One of the more in-your-face ways we affect biodiversity is by introducing non-native species, either intentionally or unintentionally. Again, there are so many examples of this that you can learn more about it in another video I did. But suffice it to say, whether it's kudzu in North America or cane toads in Australia, invasive species have a knack for out-competing or outright eating native species to the point that it rocks the world of an entire ecosystem. And finally, probably the most direct impact we have on biodiversity is simply over-harvesting certain organisms. We're overfishing the oceans to meet growing demand for popular fish species like tuna, while on land we're exterminating important important predators like wolves to protect livestock, those cows again. And the less diverse those ecosystems are, the more vulnerable they become to disturbances, including those other 4 impacts I just mentioned. And the fact is, there's a bunch more where those came from, because there's a whole separate set of effects that humanity has in the biosphere that stem simply from us putting the wrong amounts of certain stuff in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what we call pollution.
All right. What did this video make you curious about learning more about? So maybe what aspect of the environment does this video make you more curious to learn more about when you're looking at environmental issues? Anything? I think I would like to know more about the change in ocean temperatures and how that's changed the marine life and the plant life in those areas. So I think that would be really interesting to learn more about that with warming oceans or seasons or things like that. Are they just migrating? Or what populations are we seeing decline? Yeah, there's some really good one on Netflix. There's a really good one on polar bears and stuff. Yeah, there's a really good one on Netflix about polar bears and the change in the ice caps and how it's just really making the hunting seasons shorter and therefore harder for the polar bears because there isn't as much ice as long. So that's one of the things. Oftentimes it's not just, oh, there's less ice caps. The hunting season, there's less ice because it's just warmer sooner. So there's still ice, but deforestation is a really interesting one too. I also think it would be really good to learn more about the Amazon rainforest because there's always talk about it depleting, but I don't think we realize exactly how important and how dense that biosphere is, you know? I know I love Arctic animals. They're really cute. Yeah. What our future would look like. Yeah. And how can we, some change is normal, right? We look through there was an ice age, dinosaurs have gone extinct. So some change in things is normal, you know what I mean? Or out of our control, I should say. But what can we do to minimize or to slow it down? Change is normal, but the pace with which it's happening is not normal. So that's, say change is normal. Change is normal, but over a slow period of time, not as quickly. And we're speeding that up. So exactly, we're contributing too much to the change process. All right. Awesome. So let's jump over into our notebook. All right. In what ways has the federal government responded to new environmental threats in the 1960s? Do you think that they've done enough? So looking over here, we've seen since the formation of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, we've seen about 30 pieces of legislation that are very broad reaching passed in the United States. As the environmental movement has evolved, its focus has become more holistic and global. New research in the field of ecology environmental science has demonstrated how connected different environments are. As a result, a number of interregional and multinational agreements have been signed, including the United Nations Convention of Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution. So there's a lot of goals to try to reduce pollution. Today we are looking at fracking, genetically modified foods, new oil spills, such as Deepwater Horizon in 2010. We look to global pollutions in countries like China, the deforestation in the Amazon. So there are a lot of, depending on which country, not all of them share the same, environmental issues, right? So you have to look at the country, the population, what is their major, and try to collectively, address the individual needs for the betterment of society. Okay, 2 questions, we'll do that, and then we're just gonna do our primary source, which is generally considered to have incited environmental movements. Okay, so let's hear it from you. Is it the belief that the environment needs safeguarding from the results of human activities, the release of Silent Springs by Rachel Carson, smog buildup from the mass construction, or the Santa Barbara oil spills in 1969? I went over this in real detail yesterday. Which one sparked the environmental movement? Which one of these? A, B, C, or D? If you were paying attention yesterday, and we answered this question. She died of cancer. So A is the belief that the environment needed safeguarding from human activities. What or who sparked this movement? Is it A, B, C, or D? So I'm basically trying to tell you A is not correct. Yes, B, right? Silent Springs by Rachel Carson, right? Silent Springs by Rachel Carson. So this is definitely going to be a question you'll see on your quiz. So make sure that you remember that, okay? How has the environmental movement evolved since the 1960s? Okay, it has become increasingly global and focused on sustainability and the application of technology in environmental protection. All right, let's get the answer then. So have we done enough? Well, the federal government continues to pass and amend environmental laws to address emerging threats. It has participated in international efforts to address global environment issues and taken steps to address environmental threats. There are over 30 environmental legislations that have been passed and overseen by the EPA as of today, in the United States. So in our country, there have been a lot of changes. Does that mean that everything's perfect or we've always done enough? Probably not, but we have done a lot, okay? The problem that we find is it's not just, no one country is going to solve it, right? We have to see that global participation, and some countries are more willing than others. Some are very, very resistant, and some. So India has been very resistant. China has been very resistant. They also make up some of the most populous countries in the world. So again, everyone needs to play their part, but it is hard when the larger, more populous countries will not participate on the same level or will not commit on the same level because they often have higher rates of pollution being put out. So the stress is that this really has to be an international, everyone has to buy in. And unfortunately, you can't always get other nations to buy in. All right, let's move on to our primary source, the Keystone Pipeline. Okay, so instead of reading the document, I actually found a couple short videos. The first one just gives you a general overview of it, and then the second one is going to help us explain the controversy. Okay, so why people are for it, why people are concerned about it. Okay, and this is a really big one in the United States because this is huge for moving oil from Canada down to Texas. So therefore, and anybody in between. So I think you can have tap off points all the way down, you know, going from the northern border down the Mississippi, basically. It wouldn't be on the Mississippi, but following, you know, that line, and providing oil locally, more affordable and accessibility, but at what cost of where is that pipeline going through? And then the fear of oil spills or altering the environment to create this pipeline. Okay, so I'm not saying you have to go one way or another, but be willing to kind of hear the full scope, okay, as we go through. So here's information background, kind of explaining what it is.
The Keystone XL pipeline extension would stretch about 1,200 miles, most of it in the United States, from Alberta, Canada, down to Nebraska. There are lots of pipelines out there, some of which would connect with this. So why all the fuss about this extension? First of all, the environment. Opponents say that they fear that this will spoil the landscape. If there is a spill, that it could contaminate groundwater, hurt humans and animals. And they say this is dirty oil, a type of oil that when it's burned produces more greenhouse gases. Supporters say the company that wants this, TransCanada, has already promised much more robust safety measures, that rail shipments are rising already to bring this oil in, and the rail shipments are riskier than the pipeline would be. Second issue, jobs. Supporters like to cite a study that says somewhere around 42,000 jobs or more would benefit from this pipeline. That includes not only the people who work on it, but people in restaurants and hotels and supply houses. But opponents say that's all temporary. That's for 1 or 2 years while this thing is built. In the end, there may be only 50 permanent jobs coming out of this. So that raises the real question, why would you want to build this thing at all? It's only about 36 inches across. Does it really make a difference? Supporters say yes, it does. It means about 830,000 barrels of oil a day coming into the United States from a secure ally, reducing our dependence on overseas oil from places like Venezuela or the Middle East. Whereas opponents say, look, it is just not worth it for all those various reasons they've already cited, even as supporters continue to say, look, it's time after all this debate to dig the trenches and to get this pipe into.
So there's often a lot of sides to the same, to an issue, right? There's the environmental concerns, which they make some very, very good concerning points and stuff like that. There's also, well, if we're shipping it in from the Middle East or Venezuela, how are we getting it here? If we're getting oil from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is a big one that we get it from. Venezuela is a big one we get it from. We even got some of our oil from Russia. We don't currently because we have an embargo with them. If you're shipping it from overseas, how are you getting it here? Anybody? Because it's easy to say no to this. A boat, good. So you're doing this on a barger. And so we've seen this before where bargers have crashed or sunk and then the oil goes in the ocean. So we have seen that before. So the reality is that no matter what, getting our oil is risky. It is. We are a dependent society in oil. We're trying to replace it slowly but surely, but that will take time. So no matter where we get it from, overseas or by, a bordering country, transporting oil is expensive. It is risky. The further you buy it from, the more expensive it is. So they make really good points, but we also have to acknowledge and where is it coming from and those risks and the fuel that's being used to push on the boats. So sometimes it's not easy enough just to say, no, we shouldn't, or yes, we should. Sometimes you have to be willing to look at the scope of things, okay? So let's look a little bit more at the pros, cons of this.
My name is Liam DeBoer. I'm here with ET Transport, and today we're going to take a look at what North American politicians have to say about the highly controversial Keystone Pipeline. With rising fuel costs, many are looking for a solution, so over the course of this video, we'll cover initial reactions to the pipeline being scrapped by President Biden.
So one thing to note, so anytime the Middle East has issues, like right now, the Israeli-Palestine war, anytime there's issues or something going on in the Middle East, it does impact our oil because our oil comes from the Middle East, or a lot of it comes from the Middle East and stuff like that. So that is something else when they talk about rising costs and stuff like that. That means that wherever you're getting it from, whatever's going on in that region can affect the price. When things are good, prices go down. When things are unstable or bad, prices go up. So it makes it very volatile, the pricing. So that's what he's kind of talking about.
And what our leaders are saying now, that energy independence is becoming a prominent topic in public discourse. Don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with the world of trucking, and let's get into it. The Keystone Pipeline XL is a proposed expansion project on an already functioning and built pipeline that was scrapped by President Biden via an executive order. This pipeline was intended to carry crude oil extracted from tar sands in Har City, Alberta, Canada, over the span of 1,200 miles to Steel City in Nebraska, where it could connect to an existing pipeline segment that ends on the Gulf Coast. This pipeline has been in debate over the last few administrations, with Obama putting a swift end to the pipeline in 2015, which Trump then revived, and now Biden has followed in his previous presidential partner's footsteps. The most notable environmental concern is that the pipeline would need to cross the Ogallala Aquifer, which stretches all the way from South Dakota to Texas and provides.
So this is a really big concern because this is a huge water source. Also in South Dakota, the proposed pipeline would go through, I believe, at least one or two Native American reservations. So it is important to maybe kind of look at where it's being proposed and then again, helping weigh the pros and cons and is it worth the risk?
Both drinking water and irrigation to many states along the way, including Oklahoma, Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, and Nebraska. On the other side of the coin, with a world war seemingly in our near future, which will bring with it a great deal of economic sanctions in both directions and the need for North American countries to become energy independent in an effort to curb already out of control inflation.
So again, the war with Russia and Ukraine, that was a supplier of oil for us, so we've cut that off. So that caused oil prices to go up. Now we see the Israeli-Palestine conflict. When things happen overseas, if we are dependent on them for a resource, their problems become our problems as far as pocketbook and expense, okay? So that's what they're talking about. The more dependent we are on a foreign source, that can put us in a pickle. What if we do go to war with that country? What if we do have issues with that country? What if with relation, we could see a shortage? And so it is something that a lot of people, that has to be considered.
Due to an ever devaluing currency and supply chain issues. If you haven't seen our initial video covering this pipeline, there's much more information about its pros and cons, and you can check that out right here. Now, I want to be clear before covering the political comments about the Keystone Pipeline. Outside of the Biden administration, it is very hard to find politicians who support the scrapping of this project. Even Justin Trudeau, a walking billboard for green energy, was disappointed by Biden's executive order last year.
Finally, the premiers and I discussed the new administration in the United States. We had a great Team Canada approach with the previous administration, and that's something that will continue to serve us well. During our conversation, the premiers and I talked about the United States' decision on the Keystone XL pipeline. I am, of course, disappointed with this choice. To workers, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan, who've been hit hard, we will continue to have your backs. We will always stand up for good Canadian jobs.
The Premier of Alberta, where the pipeline was meant to be built, echoed similar remarks upon this emergency order being announced.
We are deeply disturbed that one of President Biden's first actions in office has been to...
So the premier is like the governor of that territory, okay, or that province. So equivalent to like us having like a state governor.
rescind the presidential permit for the Keystone XL pipeline border crossing. This is a gut punch for the Canadian and Alberta economies. Sadly, it is an insult directed at the United States' most important ally and trading partner on day one of a new administration. Today, as I speak, over 2,000 women and men have lost their jobs or are heading home from good-paying union jobs as a result of this decision. My thoughts go to every one of them as they cope with the distressing consequences of today's decision. We'll continue to fight for them and for the 59,000 jobs that this project would create. Let's be clear about what happened today. The leader of our closest ally retroactively vetoed approval for a pipeline that already exists and which is co-owned by a Canadian government, directly attacking by far the largest part of the Canada-US trade relationship, which is our energy industry and exports.
Well, it's been a year since the executive order, so where are we all now? Well, with the sanctions being placed on Russia, who according to the EIA produces 17% of the world's natural gas and 12% of its oil, both fuel and consumer products prices have gone through the roof, seeing as it requires fuel to get any product to where it needs to go. This has brought the Keystone Pipeline back into public discussion, as many think it's necessary for Western countries, Canada and America in particular, to start focusing on energy independence. So let's see what Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, had to say when being asked about the current state of gas prices and potential fixes involving the Keystone Pipeline.
And then just a quick yes or no, because there's a lot of gray area here. Is a restart of the Keystone XL construction completely off the table as long as Joe Biden is president?
Well, why don't you tell me what that would help address?
I'm asking you if it is an option. You guys say all options are on the table. Is restarting Keystone construction one of them?
If we're trying to bring about more supply, that does not address any problem.
It's supply from Canada, a friendly ally, instead of Saudi Arabia.
That's already,
or Iran.
we're already getting that oil, Peter. It's the pipeline is just a delivery mechanism. It is not an oil field. So it does not provide more supply into the system. It does not address.
Is it possible that Joe Biden will ever say, you guys can go ahead with construction of Keystone XL?
There's no plans for that, and it would not address any of the problems we're having currently.
Recently, a letter written by Congressman Rick Allen, which has been signed by over 40 members of Congress, is asking Joe Biden's administration to reevaluate his decision, saying, quote, "We urge you to include in your speech a strong commitment to restore the Keystone XL pipeline. America must once again be energy independent so the world is less reliant on malign actors." Well, that's all from me, folks. What do you think? Should the Keystone pipeline be revived?
Sorry, I'm mute. I hope at a minimum you can see this is a really hard topic. There are always going to be, when you're talking about moving of oil and things like that, there's always going to be a lot of environmental concerns, no matter where you're getting it from, right? So the question isn't, where are we using oil? Absolutely, we're using oil and we are dependent on it. 100% we're dependent on it, and we aren't in a position yet where we can cut off. So the question becomes, where do we get it and how can we do what's best for our economy? You know what I mean? And as you can see, it's a touchy situation. When you're reliant on foreign powers, when things go bad with them, that can hurt us indirectly because we trade with them. Except the farther that oil has to travel, the more the cost. The farther oil has to travel, the more risk of an oil spill. So unfortunately, as long as we are dependent on oil, you cannot get rid of all risks of oil, because we need it and we have to transport it. So the question becomes, how can we do it in a way that is going to benefit us the most, help everyday Americans like you and I, and stuff, to have a more affordable access to oil, and hopefully not have such a volatile system and reliant source as well, with hopefully the least amount of risk to the environment. So this continues to still be a hot topic, and something that I bet we'll see in the next year, as we have a presidential election next November. So guarantee that you'll see this along with many other things, but this will come up. This has been a key talking point in elections. So whoever, once we kind of get it narrowed down and we see who the primary candidates are that are running, it's a guarantee this will be at least one debate talking point. Okay, so let's jump over to the primary source. Okay, so title and description of the document. So it's the Keystone Pipeline, key issues. So 2012 reported from Congress and specialists, energy, infrastructure, and environmental policy. So it's a 40-page document laying out the proposal, evaluations, environmental impact and strategy, and stuff. So if you want to know more about it, it is a great document to go and review, but it is long. It is 40 pages. So I was trying to find a way to kind of summarize it a little bit. So current unit, environmental issue or policy. So this is a very classic example of the needs we have as humans to survive and the environmental impact, and how do we deal with both? Because most of the time you can't just be in one part of the other. You have to find that middle ground. And again, with oil, we're going to use oil. So you say no to the Keystone Pipeline, that's your ability to say that, but do acknowledge, right, that we are getting it from somewhere and it is being transported. And so no matter what, there's going to be environmental risk. So it's how can we do it in a way that meets as many conservation and how can we do it in the most responsible way possible, considering we have to use oil. Unique features. It's a research paper given to Congress about the benefits of the energy and then the environmental concerns. Certainly, they said there's a water reservoir. Like I said, there's a couple reservations it would go through. So having to work with Native American reservations and stuff. So there's definitely, it's not just putting a pipe in the ground. There's definitely things that would have to be worked through, and there's some valid concerns there. New vocabulary, so pipeline, crude oil, permitting authority, national interests. What is this about? So it's the introduction talking points about the Canadian company that applied through Alberta, Canada, through the US to extend this pipeline that they would connect to an existing pipeline, increasing the supply of oil basically up and down the Mississippi River, the Midwest, and then from there making it easier to ship. The more supply, the shorter the distance, the easier to ship, the lower the cost. Like, for example, I was in Texas this summer. Their gas is like $1.50 cheaper a gallon. No joke. Like, so, we were averaging what, like low fours-ish and stuff. And when I was there this summer, I filled up for $2.75. I couldn't tell you the last time in Nevada I filled up for $2.75. So there is something to say about access and distance, and state governments that can have an impact on the price of oil. But I saw that, I was like, $2.75. I'm like, is this a misprint? Like, so, okay, what is the rest about? So it reports in detail about the production, concerns, benefits that this could do, and the potential impact that it could have. Okay, so we're supposed to find a quote. So I was going through, and let me see what page it was on. Okay, page 4. I thought there was a decent quote. Let me find it here. Okay, so here we go. If constructed, would carry crude oil from Alberta to the Gulf Coast of the U.S. Because the pipeline would connect the United States with a foreign country. It requires presidential permission by the State Department. So something this big or something this, sorry, there needs to be an I there in front of the F. Okay, so you can use that for the quote. just put it in parentheses. Here, let me try that again, see if I can get a better copy paste of it. There we go. So bringing it all together, after laying out all the arguments, the report states that Congress directed the president to make a determination on the president's permit application of the pipeline. It also stated that the State Department, with the president's consent, denied the Keystone XL permit, and any further permit requests would have to go through a newer process. So this was initially introduced when Barack Obama was president, and it was denied. And then it was reintroduced when President Trump was president, and it was accepted. And then when President Biden was elected, retroactively denied the permit. So as you can see, this has gone back and forth, back and forth. It has mixed reviews across party lines. So just because you're a Democrat or just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you necessarily support it or are against it. There are plenty of Democrats who are for it. There are plenty of Democrats who are against it, and same with Republicans. So this is definitely, this one doesn't always necessarily follow party line. This one, where what I mean by party line is like where, oh, this issue most Democrats would be for or against it, or this issue most Republicans. This one has created, definitely it's kind of depending probably what state and the way that you view our oil sources and pricing of oil. Okay. I guess it wasn't 8 and 9, it's 7 and 8. Okay, so go ahead, 7 and 8. You can put do not complete, or you can delete them. Yay. I know you're just devastated. All right. And then on that note, let me get you your review sheet. Okay, so this is the review sheet for 5.3. Here's the review sheet for 5.3. All right, again, so has kind of key points from each section, and also then has those checking for understanding questions, which remember often can somebody open it? Let me know if it opens okay for you. Just want to make sure the link works. It opens. Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, so you can see each section, so like Silent Spring, so some key notes on that, and then the checking for understanding question, then environmental legislation, so goes through, kind of summarize some of that, some of the environmental disasters or concerns, gives you those checking for understanding questions, long-term effects, okay, same checking understanding questions, and then there could be a question or two on the Keystone Pipeline, so making sure you understand what it is, why it's controversial. Okay, which I feel like, do you feel like the videos gave you a decent understanding of what it is and then some of the pros and cons? Do you feel, I mean, maybe you're not well versed in it, but you at least have a general understanding of the Keystone Pipeline. Or do you still feel lost on the Keystone Pipeline? Give me a thumbs up if you feel like it gave you a decent general understanding of it, or thumbs down if you feel like you need more information. Okay, so there could be a question or two on the Keystone Pipeline. So just making sure that you understand, you know, like what is it, what are some of the pros, or why has it been proposed, and then what are some of the cons, or people who are, you know, resistant to it. Okay, because it definitely has an environmental aspect to it, right? It's economic, it's jobs, it's a fuel source that we need, but it also has environmental risk. And anytime you transport oil, there's environmental risk, and we've seen some of the consequences of that before with oil spills. So the question becomes, how can we reduce the distance we're because the further you transport oil, the more risk of a spill, right? So reducing the distance can be a good thing. The way in which it's carried, having stricter regulations, right, and stuff, and also trying to control, you know, decent pricing and stuff. So it's, as you can see, it's complicated. It's often not just one thing. It's looking at the many different aspects. And environmental is very concerning, and that definitely needs to be one aspect that's looked at. Where is it going through? What could be the consequences? What safety measures would be put in place if they did approve it? On how much will it disturb the areas it's going through? How can we minimize any impact to wildlife or the environment or things like that, or put safety measures in place if there was a spill that we could minimize that would happen, and stuff. So yeah, a lot of things that would have to go into that or be considered. All right. So going into the weekend, I'm going to give you some time to work. We're in here till 1:40. Okay. So we've got another 20 minutes and stuff. So making sure this Friday you do your attendance assignment, 5.3, go get it submitted now. We did the whole thing. You've got your quiz notes. And then for over the weekend, civics exam is open till the 11th, and module 5 lesson 1 notebook and quiz are open till 11th. Everything closes on the 11th. Okay, so it's really important that if you're behind on anything that you're getting those in, especially the civics exam, right? That's required to graduate. So we really need you to make sure not only that you're taking it, but you're getting that 35 out of 50 minimum score. Okay, so that you meet that requirement. All right. We'll hang out here for a little bit longer. I'm going to stop recording. So feel free to get some assignments in. You can review for your quiz or anything else you're missing, and then I'll let you go a few minutes early.